Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Angelika Graswald, also known as the Kayak Killer? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, consider supporting me on Patreon, and check out my podcast. I'll put the relevant links in the description for this video. So first I'll start with the background of Angelika Graswald. I'll move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Angelika Graswald was born in Latvia on February 27, 1980. Her father was a police officer who became a trucking company administrator, and her mother cleaned houses. Angelika's childhood was somewhat challenging due to poverty. Although she was able to have some sense of normalcy, she would go swimming and fishing, she played volleyball, and she would go on summer camping trips each year. Angelica went to college, but left at age 20. She took a job as a nanny for a Norwegian family in Greenwich, Connecticut. She worked there for less than a year and a half when she met a repairman who was there to fix the heating and cooling system. They would get married, but less than a year later they broke up. The night before she turned 21, she made her way into a bar in Stamford, Connecticut. They offered her a job. Angelica met a man named Richard Graswald, and they married. She temporarily took a job working in the FDR Presidential Library and Museum. After meeting a DJ at a bar, she left her husband. She told the DJ that she didn't have a place to live and she was moving in with him. He never extended her that invitation, but he went along with her plan. 18 months later, they broke up. When her temporary job ended, she went back to working as a bartender. She was fired for demonstrating a poor work ethic, but found another job. Her performance there wasn't really any better, but that employer was much more patient and forgiving. Angelica was often late to work. She would be on the phone when she was supposed to be working, and she would leave early. Angelica met Vincent Viafor, who had also been married twice. He was a project manager for the state of New York. The two started living together in Vincent's apartment in Poughkeepsie, New York. At first, the relationship seemed positive, like they were in love, but then it became tumultuous. The two would frequently have heated arguments. Vincent was thinking of kicking Angelica out of his apartment. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. We start on April 19, 2015. Angelica was 35 years old, and Vincent was 46 at this time. They weren't feeling too great on that day. The night before, they had been drinking, and they were both hungover. They planned on going kayaking on the Hudson River, even though inclement weather was forecasted for that evening. On the way to the launch site, they stopped at a Wendy's to eat and a Sunoco gas station where Angelica bought cigarettes. Nothing says I want to live a long life more than drinking, smoking, eating fast food, and kayaking in bad weather. They arrived at Plum Point Park on the west bank of the Hudson River. The pair wanted to make their way to Bannerman Island, the home of Bannerman Castle. This is a Scottish-style castle that used to be a military surplus arsenal, but it was mostly destroyed by fire in 1969. The couple wanted to stage a photo shoot on the island. Angelica had brought high heels and fishnet stockings. People are not allowed to visit the island except as part of a scheduled tour, but Angelica had volunteered as a gardener with the Bannerman Castle Trust. She was friends with the caretakers of the castle. The couple did not climb into their kayaks until 4:15 p.m. Angelica had her purse, and she was wearing a life jacket. Vincent did not have a life jacket. He had a camera, phone, and a bag containing beer. The island was 1.25 miles away. They arrived at the island by 5 o'clock. They didn't do their planned photo shoot. Rather, they just casually took pictures and drank beer. At 7 p.m., the couple climbed back in their kayaks. They paddled to the other side of the island. They wanted to stop there as well, but then decided to head back to the shore. The wind was picking up, the waves were intensifying, and the sun was setting. The tide was heading out, which meant that the return trip would be more difficult than their trip there. Angelica would call 911 40 minutes later at 7:40 p.m. She gave the dispatcher their location. They were about halfway back to the original launch site. She said Vincent's kayak had flipped over and he was in the water. The waves were carrying her kayak north, but the current was dragging Vincent south. He was holding on to a small floating cushion, but did not have a life jacket. She couldn't get to him. 5 minutes later, she indicated she couldn't see Vincent anymore. She started wailing, saying that she is not worried about herself, but she is worried about him. Angelica's kayak flipped over just before a rescue boat reached her. She was pulled out of the water and taken to a hospital where she was treated for hypothermia. The police noted that Angelica seemed calm, odd, and did not show any emotion. The police were immediately suspicious of her as she undertook a series of what they considered unusual behaviors. She went to a memorial for Vincent at a bar. A friend said that she looked a little too happy for someone who lost her fiancé. The police noted that Angelica sang the song Hotel California. This is a song by the Eagles, which has a number of references to Satan, but it's really a metaphor for the rock and roll lifestyle of the 70s. A lot of drugs, alcohol, and materialistic thinking. I guess the police didn't like her music selection. If they thought that she committed murder because she sang Hotel California, what would they have done if she sang Ice Ice Baby by Vanilla Ice? They would have brought in the SWAT team. If she sang Every Breath You Take, they would have been like, well, that's all right, carry on. The police found out that Vincent had made Angelica the primary beneficiary on multiple life insurance policies. The combined value was $550,000. Angelica posted unusual items on Facebook, like a picture of her posing on one leg on the shore of the Hudson River, and a video of her performing a cartwheel, reminiscent of the cartwheel allegedly performed by Amanda Knox, which caused the police to be suspicious. Amanda Knox denies that she ever performed that cartwheel. Vincent's body was found about a month after he disappeared. The police believed before he was found that maybe Angelica shot him to death, but the cause of death was drowning. Angelica went to a memorial on Bannerman Island. 3 police officers intercepted her on the island, led her away from her friends, and asked her questions. They were interested in a drain plug that was missing from Vincent's kayak. So this is a small drain plug on the top of the kayak toward the back, so that if water gets in it, someone could flip it over and drain it. According to the police, Angelica said she removed the drain plug and placed it in a drawer in their apartment long before the trip. She said that she removed a ring that held Vincent's paddles together and took his paddle when he was in the water. The paddle floated, so perhaps it could have saved his life. She was asked if she intentionally removed the plug from the kayak so that Vincent would drown. She said, "I guess I did." The police did not record the confession, so there's no way to know if she really said any of those things. She was transported to a New York State police barracks and interrogated for 11 hours. Angelica eventually provided a somewhat vague and bizarre confession. In my opinion, there were many problems with the interrogation. I'll cover those in the analysis. She was charged with second-degree murder, but was eventually allowed to plead guilty to criminally negligent homicide. The case for the state really just fell apart. She was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Angelica was released after 31 months in jail and 1 month in prison. She indicated that she pled guilty because she didn't want to risk being sentenced to 15 years to life for second-degree murder. She still maintains her innocence, even though she pled guilty. Now moving to my analysis. There were many problems with the interrogation. The police read Angelica the Miranda rights. She agreed to talk to them. But then they said the interrogation would be like therapy. She would feel better. They made it seem as though if she was honest with them, she would be granted leniency, which was not true. They appeared to back away from the role of being a police officer, saying that no one was judging her, it's not about assessing right or wrong, and they were not the morality police. The interrogation started at 3:30 p.m. and ran for 11 hours. There were breaks for pizza, tea, and yoga. Angelica repeatedly said that she did not kill Vincent. Angelica said that her relationship with Vincent was not perfect. She had mixed feelings about his death. He wanted her to participate in a dominant, submissive sexual role play with another person. He demanded sex all the time. Now that he was gone, she felt free. She started talking about how she sensed Vincent was going to die that day because she was in tune with the other side. She backed away from her initial story about taking the ring off of his paddles, now saying that he removed it. She also changed her story about taking the paddle away from him, saying that Vincent pushed it away from himself, it floated over to her, and she grabbed it. At 1 a.m., she said, "I wanted him dead and now he's gone, and I'm okay with that. Now do we have a deal?" She indicated she wanted to go home to feed her cat. Of course, she was arrested and charged with murder. As far as mental health factors, a few different people weighed in on this topic for various reasons. At Angelica's sentencing, the judge told Angelica that she must have some type of narcissistic personality disorder. She had an excessive need for admiration and exaggerated feelings of self-worth. Vincent was the victim of her characteristics. I'm not sure why the judge felt qualified to comment on Angelica's mental health, or how having some type of disorder makes her a bad person. Seems a bit judgmental, although I guess that's why they call them judges. A mental health clinician hired by the defense indicated that Angelica showed signs of paranoid ideation and hypomania. She had euphoria, was impulsive, lacked judgment, and was grandiose. She had a high level of suggestibility, suggesting a false confession was a possibility. She was self-dramatizing, overactive, and energetic. A mental health clinician hired by the state concluded that Angelica was normal. That seems to happen a bit when we see state versus defense mental health clinicians. The state magically seems to find that the person doesn't have anything going on in terms of mental health, and the defense seems to find various problems. Was Angelica actually guilty? Did she cause Vincent's death? Some have suggested this is a case of a false confession. The state did a reenactment with a similar kayak to the one that Vincent was using the day he died. They took out the drain plug and tried to see if it would sink. Their experiment showed that it did take on more water with the drain plug missing. Other recreations by the media demonstrated that the drain plug made no difference. It did not increase the risk of the kayak sinking at all. In addition, Vincent clearly knew that the plug was not installed. He actually ran a strap through the opening when he was fastening the kayak to the top of the Jeep Cherokee for the trip to Plum Point Park. It is a bit of an understatement to say safety did not appear to be Vincent's highest priority. As far as the story about the ring on the paddles, Angelica denied doing this. There's no evidence that she did this. The same thing applies to the idea of taking the paddle from Vincent as he was drowning. Vincent took actions that put himself in danger. He knew the weather was going to be bad. They did not launch into the river until it was quite late compared to when the inclement weather was expected. He was not wearing a life jacket, and he had been drinking. As far as Angelica, she didn't flip his kayak over. She didn't drag him under the water. I'm not convinced that she could have killed him under these circumstances. I think everything in this case comes down to the so-called confession. The state's case was entirely built on statements that Angelica made and her unusual behavior. They had no actual physical evidence of anything. No one witnessed a crime. There was no video. Nothing. After watching video and reading transcripts of some of the interrogation, I think it is reasonable to believe that Angelica offered a false confession. She seemed whimsical, nonchalant, distracted, and I was not convinced that she actually understood what they wanted from her, like what the police wanted from her, or what she was doing there. It also bothers me that she repeatedly said she did not kill Vincent, but the investigators just kept pushing and pushing until she said what they wanted. They just wanted to hear something else. They thought if they just kept asking the question, maybe she would change her answer. They were highly manipulative. The interrogation was unnecessarily long, and the deceptive practices of the police, combined with Angelica's personality characteristics, probably led to a false confession. I think cultural differences could have played a part as well. Angelica suggested that in her culture of origin, women are not meant to be seen as crying, weak, or broken. So she didn't want to appear that way. That's what she learned when she was younger. Even though I think this was a false confession, the police were able to use it against Angelica. The problem is they didn't actually have a murder. This was not a homicide. It was an accident, at least in my opinion. Usually the problem the police have is that they do have a murder, but they do not have a confession. Here they had a confession without a murder. I think Angelica had a personality that didn't win her any points with the police. or with the public. She appeared to be cold, lacked empathy. In the interviews she did with the media, she did not present well. I can understand why nobody liked her. Her vague and fanciful way of describing things makes it seem as though she did not understand the severity of what happened, like she didn't care that someone had died. Even though this is troubling, this does not make her a killer. I think this was a conviction based on disgust. I find it ironic that the investigators would say they were not the morality police, when in fact, that is exactly how they functioned in this case. Those are my thoughts on the case of Angelika Graswald. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis on this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.